what daily to do should a founder that's looking to getting investment through an angel or VC do to already prepare on a daily basis to be ready for due diligence?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing from at least my experience of going through so many different tech and non-tech DDs is literally to track key metrics on daily basis. And these key metrics can be of various types, right? It depends on the due diligence that you are passing through. It can be investor-related data, like, for example, monitor revenue, churn, CAC, LTV, ARR, your burn rate, different growth KPIs. If you're talking about the tech DD, it can be something relevant to SLAs. It can be some things relevant to the system performance, some security metrics, amount of incidents, and so on. If you're talking about the product, then starting with simple things like amount of active users per month, right? So it really depends on the stage of the company and stage of the product. But in many cases, founders are coming to the due diligence and not having a sufficient data. And this is becoming a very big problem, right? So during the due diligence stage, because you simply, in many cases, cannot just generate this data out of nowhere, right? So you need to take time to be ready for this due diligence with the sufficient amount of tracking period, right? So which, for example, lasts half a year. And this would be the key suggestion, right? So track key metrics daily from different disciplines.
Awesome. Okay, so it's not enough just to have a great pitch and to convince somebody to invest in you. You also have to be ready with loads of data so that when they're excited about your pitch and they dig deeper into see if should I really invest, then you actually have some data to provide.
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So let's put all that on our to-do list before you start looking for funding.
Yeah, correct.
All right. So, but Dmitry, let's dive a bit deeper into this topic of due diligence, because there are due diligence in different subjects and so on. So overall, what does due diligence mean?
Yeah. So in general, due diligence is a thorough process where the investors assess the startup viability, risks, potential growth, right? So potential strategies of market penetration. And there are so many different types of due diligence. The first question to ask, at which stage is your company, right? So the due diligence at the early stage, for example, pre-seed round is very different from the due diligence that we make in, for example, Series B round. Second thing is you need to ask what is the reason for this due diligence, because the reason is also super impactful. Is it audit? Is it investment route? Is it M&A acquisition? Is it IPO? Is it what exactly is the reason for the diligence? Because like this, you can be much better prepared, and there are different set of processes and documents in general needed for different types of due diligences. Also, the types of due diligence can be generic due diligence, financial due diligence, or tech due diligence, right? So this is another question to ask even before we start to, prepare everything related to due diligence. So if you're talking about the generic due diligence, then usually it's everything related to the business itself, like market, traction, competitor analysis, go-to-market strategy, and so on. It includes also financial part, which is usually revenues generated or projection of the revenues. It can be burn rate. It can be unit economics, right? So of the acquisition of the customer. Then it includes usually also legal part, which is intellectual property. Do you have a proper contracts? What are your compliance? What are your liabilities next to different vendors and so on? It also includes tech due diligence if you are building tech-heavy product, right? So which includes also so many things. I believe that tech due diligence is a topic in itself, right? So me speaking as CTO, it includes code, architecture, security, team, and so on. But in general, whatever due diligence you do, some of the things they are very similar, right? So across different types of due diligence. So let's start with the team, right? I mean, it doesn't matter which stage of the company, right? So every investor, angel or venture capital would check the team. So a team means not only the founders, but actually the team that also built in the product and so on. Obviously, the team is more important at the early stage because when you don't have a traction, when you don't have a real product, and maybe you have MVP, then the team is very important. The due diligence starts not when you officially signing the term sheet, right? So the due diligence starts on the first call with investor, and this is where the team started to be assessed, right? So with the questions like why you are starting this business, what is your vision? I mean, like there are so many things that are happening around the team and individuals because investors investing not only in the traction, right? So they also investing in people who are actually driving this traction and execution. And in many cases, also, it's very interesting. Many founders don't know that venture capitals do a lot of reference checks, right? So, for example, 2 weeks ago, I had a call with a very high-profile venture capital from US about one person with whom I worked almost 6 or 7 years ago, right? So, and they're really going deep into the my understanding whether this person can really drive and be a founder and drive the company forward. So it's really happening, right? So on the daily basis. Another thing that is very important, I believe, in any type of due diligence is everything related to the customer, right? So I think it's a must for the founders to start collecting different proof points about the customers. Like, for example, case studies, like testimonials, like usage of the data of the system, right? So, I mean, you don't want to be in the situation when you had a great pitch and then finally venture capital spoke to your customers, and out of 100, for example, B2B companies discovered that 99 of them actually registered and never used the product, right? So I mean, this is very important to really understand what your customers are doing, right? So get the feedback, improve, engage the customers inside your platform, inside your product. Then I would say the next important thing, right, in due diligence overall is everything related to data room, right? So I mean, in any due diligence, it doesn't matter if you are doing tech due diligence or other type of due diligence, you need to be ready with a very well-defined data room. So data room must include as much as possible the most updated version of your company. So the most updated, for example, tech architecture, the most updated team organizational structure, right? So you don't want to be in the situation when actually you submitted a document which were valid 2 years ago, right? And the situation completely changed, and then actually it will raise different like red flags of why exactly you are hiding the current state of your company, whether it's team structure, whether it's some technology that introduced, whether it's security posture, and so on and so on. Yeah, I think I would say I would stop answering this question because this question can be answered endlessly. You can go obviously to the tech due diligence, right? So more, but generic, right? And there are several things which are common for any due diligence, right? And I'm pretty sure you can find in so many sources what are they, right? So, but it's very important to start it before actually you really engage the term sheet, for example. You need to start working on this before the engagement.
Yeah, that will be my next question. How much time should you expect to use on preparing your due diligence?
Yeah, I mean, like, I really doubt that somebody can answer this question very precisely. So, I mean, in different stages of the company, from my experience, the preparation for due diligence usually were taken between, like, let's say 4 to 6 weeks, something like this, right? So, and this preparation means that really creating the documents, right? So, which probably will be needed. It is not including the stage that you need to start tracking your data 6 months ago, right? I mean, because this is completely other topic. You need to, kind of anticipate what might be the questions and what might you need in terms of data preparation when you will come to the stage in 6 months, right? So for the due diligence, so you better start tracking this data right now, right? So, and then have a good answers about different fluctuations in your data, whether it's revenues, whether it's active users, right? So when you're coming to the due diligence. If you're talking about the active due diligence process, in many cases, at least from my experience, it's pretty fast. It's 2 to 6 weeks, right? So if it's early stage, then it's easier because you don't have a lot of things to prepare. It's more about like speak to the investors, speak to the angels, right? So It's like speak to the team, which is represented venture capital, and explain everything and so on. So it's more about like network communication and being together, spending time together. In the later stages, there are a lot of things and involvement like CEOs, CTOs, CFOs, legal support. There are many things that you need to do. I can give concrete example. Last due diligence, like tech due diligence, I did around like 3 or 4 months ago, and but I was not the one who is doing due diligence from the side of the company. I was the auditor, right? So I came to the company and made a report. It took me around 12 weeks to actually generate this report, and majority of the time was because the company was not ready, right? So there was no readiness of the company. So we were waiting for different documents. We were waiting for different answers, for scheduled meetings, for the partner meetings, right? So because you need to do the third-party checks and so on. Finally, I generated 96 pages report only on tech part. And it went to different like family offices and so on, and different investors. But overall, right, I mean, this process could be much shorter. And also it's important to have it as much shorter as possible, because maybe in 3 months, actually, those investors will lose the interest, right? So, and this opportunity window is also not endless. So that's why I would say 12 weeks is pretty big amount of time, right? So for making for auditor the tech DD, for primary reason of waiting for the material, right? So it should be much shorter.
Yeah. And you mentioned it would take 4 to 6 weeks to create all of the documents to deliver to the angels of VC. Is that how many people? Is that a one-person job?
I think it's again like in some companies it was one-person job. It was I mean like early stage founder is working obviously with for example a couple of lawyers and so on. But in some cases it was. I can give one example. One company we were passing the due diligence for. This was investment round. This was a very late stage company, and it took us I think around like 6 weeks, maybe I don't know 6-7 people. Right, so to prepare the due diligence and we submitted close to, I don't know, probably 200 documents only on TechDD. So it was really heavy one because it was late stage. It was a very serious leading investor and so on and so on. So that's why, yeah, in this case, it was, 6 weeks, 6 people working like around the clock really to generate 200 documents, security policies and architecture and team structure and future growth projections and a lot of things really. So that's why TechDD is not simple task in general, right? But it's a game changer for whom you are doing it and at which stage of the company you're doing. Because in early stage, like one person can generate this TechDD, right, in 2 weeks, and because there are not much things happening, right? So instead of having 200 contracts with vendors, you have I don't know, maybe 5. So and it's a big difference, right? So that's why, yeah, this is very very dependent on the stage of the company.
But that also invites the question, who should not go the route of angels and VC? Because not everybody will have 4 to 6 weeks and 6 people to create all of this documentation or even want to do that because they want to focus on getting the customers and so on. So who should not go that route?
I think the simple question is like, I'm speaking now as an entrepreneur, right? So, I mean, due diligence should not prevent you going to investors ever. So, I mean, like, it doesn't matter. It's like, it's like, are you ready to have a baby? No, never. You're never ready to have a baby, right? So, I mean, like at least, some people think like this. The same here, right? So when you will be ready to meet the first investor, right? So probably never. So you just need to go and make the best possible effort in preparation, right? So I mean, like waiting for this perfect moment and waiting for this perfect due diligence data room or perfect traction, right? I mean, obviously you should be smart enough, right? I mean, and pick up the right moment in terms of your numbers, right? So when it's right timing to go to the investors. But I would say, ideal scenario, you need to start preparing the things for the due diligence ahead of time. But if you don't have this time, it's always better to have a good numbers and then try to combine them in last minute than having bad numbers, right? So and have it perfect data room, right? So that's why in my opinion the numbers is very important, right? So you need to track them and really understand. It will help you also to understand what is the right moment to go to the investment round, right? So I mean, yeah, that's why my simple answer, it should not prevent you going to anywhere. Yeah.
All right, so it's a lot of work, but go there anyway. And if you start early on creating the data, then it won't be that big of a hassle anyway. So that's a perfect daily advice that you're bringing today. Thank you very much. Is there any typical mistakes that you see in tech due diligence?
Yeah. I mean, like tech due diligence is a very special topic, right? I mean, there are many companies actually specializing specifically to make only tech DD, right? So because it's very complex. So, I mean, what typically tech DD is including, right? So, I mean, obviously the team, right? So the engineers and so on and so on. Then different metrics, right? So uptime, reliability metrics, architecture, code-based quality. It can be tech stack justification, right? It means that, I mean, like, are you really using the right technologies for your stage and your product and how you're going to scale them? There are different third-party dependencies. A lot of topics relevant to intellectual property. Are you really owning the product, right, so that you are building? Which licenses do you use? Do you need licenses? What open source licenses do you have? And having said that, right, so coming to the mistakes, right, so I think I can name a couple. So one very big mistake is not having documented architecture or at least some version of system design. So, I mean, like, if you're submitting due diligence, right, so tech documentation, and there is no any type of architecture, right, so, and there are such cases sometimes, it's clear red flag for everybody, right? So also for auditor, also for investor and so on. So you must have at least some version of architecture. Even high level, the best case if you have several types of architectures, for example, integration architecture or high level architecture or security architecture, right? So on the key points of where you would need to prove, right, so that your product is really worth this investment. So this is one thing. Second thing, I believe people really underestimate the importance of security protocols. So, I mean, there should be something in due diligence documentation always about the security, whether about the processes, are you doing vulnerability scans, are you implementing security best practices, are you following cloud best practices, right? So, are you training your personnel? Are you doing anything related to security, right? So to make sure that you have, for example, endpoint management systems or anything related to other types of products that you can actually make your product more secure. The third thing I would name, it's also relevant in a way to security, it's compliance, right? So, I mean, me, when making, for example, audit for investors, right, in terms of due diligence, I do not want to see this red flag when nobody considered ever any type of compliance, right? So, I mean, like, there are so many things that you can do, right? So, and relatively easy. It's like, are you in general considering something with GDPR, SOC 2, NIS2? There are so many things that you just must consider, right? So, because it's a legal obligation. I was working with many banks in my career, right? So, and sometimes compliance of the financial institutions is even more heavier than regulation, right? So, and especially if you are building, for example, FinTech or CyberSecurity, you have to be considering compliance, right? So, and when I see data room, right, so if it doesn't have any topic relevant to compliance, right? So I would say, well, something is really missing there, right? So, and maybe last one, if you allow me, I would, I can speak about this topic. I'm pretty sure another 2 hours, but I think what is very important also is not to have the buzz factor. So, I mean, in some due diligences, what it means that in some due diligence we see that, for example, the core part of your system and product is relying on one developer. Let's imagine you have 30 developers, but core knowledge is actually aggregated in one person. Mm-hmm. And there are some cases when this person leaves and it can be engineer, this can be CTO, this can be anybody, right? So head of engineering, for example, when this person leaves, a company doesn't only have the technological problem, it has a business problem, right? So because if things are not documented, they are not really understandable by others, or the different choices in architecture were done without others knowing it, right? So how it was done and why it was done, it's becoming a very, very big problem in the due diligence, right? So, I mean, and you don't want, to be in this situation when you signed your term sheet, right? And you started the technical due diligence, and then finally this person exactly during this time is leaving, and you are in a really, really tricky situation, to say it in a very politically correct way. So, I mean, that's why many founders in general, I suggest them to be ready with this fact, not to put all the eggs in one basket, right? So, and really to distribute the knowledge, or at least to document it, right? So to make sure that more than one person really understand what is going on with technology in your company.
One last question, Dmitry.
Go for it.
So I mean, in the pitch itself, you can excite and you can hide a bit of the actuality of the situation, right? You can paint a brighter picture than it actually is, right? To get people excited. How much in the due diligence paper which you have prepared to send to the investors, how much into this gray zone can you go? Or have you seen somebody trying to smooth things out and make it look better than it actually is? And how did that work for them?
I think, first of all, I mean, if I am CTO who is preparing due diligence for investors, right? So, I mean, then my suggestion would be that, be open and honest, but also try to understand what is the real risks and if they are relevant to this particular due diligence. Because, I mean, some of the things which might be looking not the best, actually not important. So, and what is important, I think, is really to understand what is important for investor and what are the standards, right, so that you want to meet. And sometimes you can see that, for example, something which is not done in the best way, right? So, for example, you don't have a fully scalable architecture, right? So, but in some case, it's a very educated risk that you took because you were focusing on delivering certain core features, right? So instead of trying to solve all the problems which are not existing right now. And in this case, right, so, I mean, I do suggest to really write it, right? So to say, well, we don't have this, but this is the reason, right? So because our focus was exactly the customer features, right? So in this particular stage, if it's early stage, and then you will see, objective reaction on it, right? So to understand, okay, so, I mean, maybe you don't have a scalable architecture, but you kept it in mind and you made educated decision of not following something because of different time constraints or budgets or whatever it is. So that's why, for me, it's not about the hiding, it's about how really you are presenting it, how you are thinking about particular gaps that you have, right? What I do not suggest, right, so is to completely, obviously, mislead and lie, because this is really not acceptable, and in many cases it will be discovered during due diligence. If I on the side of auditor, right, and I'm preparing due diligence for the investor, then reports should be super objective, right? So, I mean, this is like, I mean, it's also a reputational topic, right? So for everybody that is doing due diligence and for the companies doing due diligence. So there is no like, red or green. It just should be very objective. This is suitable for this stage of the company. This is not suitable. This can be a red flag. This can be yellow flag, right? I mean, something that can be solvable or a huge game changer and deal breaker and so on. So it just should be objective, right? I mean, you need to take every criteria that you have from experience, right? And all the wish list of the investor and really to give an objective opinion. So this I would suggest to do for everybody who is doing due diligence. One more thing maybe to add, I think it's also important, is that due diligence never happens one directional. I mean, like, this is what also many people, probably don't realize. You also make a due diligence for investor, right? So it means that I mean, when investor is making due diligence for you, it means that investor is interested, right? So this is already a very good stage, especially when you have a term sheet, right? I mean, and don't create to yourself the situation when you sign the term sheet, right? So, but you actually mislead everything, right? So, which lead to this term sheet. But on the other side, you also need to check the investor, because investors, there are many investors in the market, right? I mean, there are, in many cases, in many industries, there is excessive amount of money, right, on the market. So, and actually, it's not, in some cases, it's not that hard to get the money. And it's more important of which type of investor you will get, right? So is this investor giving only money, or this investor also add different added value, right? So for example, distribution network for your product, right? So, or some mentorship or advisorship. Is it active investor, or they just put money, right? So, and coming to the board meeting to understand how their money is going, right? So I would suggest also to make this other direction of due diligence, because I mean, great, you made so much effort in the due diligence and you want to raise money, but finally you want to find somebody who will be working with you on the same mindset, with the same strategy, and add additional value besides the money.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is what is important also to consider, in my opinion.
All right, so there you have it. Get starting collecting the data, because that will serve you well when reaching the stage of due diligence. Thank you very much for your advice and your time, Dmitry. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.